Performing audit and sampling a process. I'm going to discuss about sampling process, how you should select samples while performing audit. You don't have time to check everything. And a normal routine organization does a lot of work, different work they are performing, different orders are executed, different purchase orders are executed, different service orders are executed, and you have no time to go through all of them. But once you take a random sample, how they perform tasks, and an unbiased sample, that gives a reflection of what they do in real time and every time. And if you take two or three random samples, it gives a solid foundation for you to make an informed judgment about their conformity status so that you can decide their level of conformity or otherwise. So let's talk about how you should select samples, because right sample is going to give you right confidence, and there is a lot of risk in selecting samples. If the sampling process is faulty, then results will be less reliable. Let me give an example here which is very, very relevant. We just had Indian, the election is just over and a new parliament was formed. And there was three or four, or I think five opinion polls conducted. Almost all polls projected BJP, a political party, to score 375 to 400 plus. And most of this opinion poll has shown a kind of a dismal performance of the oppositions. And their predictions were published with a lot of fanfare. There are a lot of discussions was ongoing. When the election was completed, when the counting started on 4th, the whole country was shaken with the results that was coming in. And BJP, I think, scored around 280, 85, and where they were expecting 400 plus. And the combined NDA alliance did not even reach 300 together, which was supposed to be 400 plus. So what I'm trying to say here is, what really went wrong? Was it camouflaged? I don't feel so. I don't feel all the 5 or 6 opinion polls were made to give some kind of observation, and what the political parties will gain once the vote is already over. But once the election was over, voting was done, and the voters have casted their votes. This result did not have any sinister intention. So I do believe the flaw was with the sampling process. If in a country of 140 crores, if you take a very selective random sample, very small sample size, and if they're biased, for example, taken from an area where it was a pocket of BJP, for example, or in a pocket which is dominated for the Congress or for any other party, results and the finding is based on the sample and the analytics they did with the opinion that the voters have given them. So these analysis is based on the feedback the voters have provided. So there is always a margin of error, and that in this particular case, it was more than 100, 120, which is casting doubt on the efficiency or effectiveness of the opinion poll process itself. Therefore, what is important is the samples are reliable, and samples are accurate, and samples are selected with a scientific basis. Let's look at what the standard talks about, and I would talk about the variations and where things can go wrong. So you have to take random samples and select random samples because there is limited time to check all of them. However, over a relevant period. So when we are selecting samples, we have to take the period from which the implementation has been declared to have started. So therefore, you have to cover the relevant period. A randomly selected samples give a real confidence. If the samples are biased, it would give biased observation, biased finding. If the samples are random, this is going to give far more reliable findings and confidence on the effectiveness of the implementation of management system. And if this is good, that means you are recommending certification of an organization with greater certainty, because your opinion, your observation has been formed. Your observation and the finding and recommendation has been formed based on the samples that you have taken. Wrong samples may lead to ineffective or inaccurate conclusion. Exactly what just now I've talked about the opinion poll. And assess adequate control of records. Of course, you have to do that. And this is where you have to take random samples. Now, why random sample? Audit decisions are based on samples. Faulty samples can give grossly misleading information. Exactly the opinion poll just now I've talked about. If you take three bad samples, a good company, your opinion would be formed that their management system is shaky. It is not effectively implemented. Again, if you take three good samples, biased samples, and which could be three good cases, there are many bad cases which escaped your detection. So you're forming a good impression about a company, an organization, which is actually not so great. So they have got a lot of variations which will not be picked up in your sample. Therefore, your conclusion would be misleading. So auditors must develop skills and techniques to select adequate representative sample. And that's precisely what I'm going to talk about now. So select random samples, unbiased representative samples. I'll talk about how do you do this. Cover scope and relevant period. Determine correct sample size. How many we should take to make, the right opinion, right judgment. Samples to cover causes of variance. There is variation always. So I have to cover both the chance cause of variation as well as assignable cause of variations. Then my findings, then my observations, then my conclusions will be more robust. We'll talk about what is chance cause of variance and what is assignable cause of variance. So I am giving this example. There are two bunches of grapes. They are very similar, but you might have noticed they are not identical. They are more lighter, they are more darker, but they all look very, very similar. They also look very, very similar in terms of their color, in terms of their size. There is more or less a good degree of consistency. Looking at these and these and these, even they're loose, you can forecast they came from the same bunch. Again, this bunch, all the grapes from this look very, very similar. But look at this tree, looks very closer from this. So there is some variations in this as well. They're not identical. They're similar, but not 100% identical. This is also similar, but not 100% identical. So this level of variation is called chance cause of variation. There is a chance that there can be some variation. In real life, the studs made from the same machine, the welding done by the same welder, the entity activities done by the same operator. All right. The espresso and the coffee made by the same barista. Oh, those kind of things. Chicken made by the same chef. Those kind of things. So there may be some variation, but that taste is going to be fairly similar. So this is called chance cause of variation. And when they are different, so these and these is called assignable cause of variance. They look very different. These two colors are different. So you can see looking at them instantly, they are grapes of different sources. They are not from the same plant. They are not from the same bunch. So now these two conditions are operating under assignable cause of variance. There are causes can be assigned. In other words, these could be welding joints done by the same welder. This is another group of welding done by another welder. Chicken made by one chef and chicken made by another chef, or things like that. So there are variations arising out of the skill and competence of two different persons, two different variable conditions, two different machines. They might look different. So, as an auditor, I try to check whether samples are here. I will take one or two from here. I will take one or two from here. If both are okay, this will give me confidence that these organizations, quality management system, or occupational health and safety, or for that matter, any management system, are operating under consistent level of control. There is absolutely good level of control. In other words, we can see that there is repeatability and reproducibility. Repeatability means variations within the same machine, within the same person. Reproducibility is variations, similar results produced by two variable conditions which are very, very different. You can still produce similar results. It's called reproducibility. So welded joints produced by one welder and welded joints made by another welder, both are acceptable. They make very, very similar level of, quality of well, in TCB, for example, if one tutor is training one program, another trainer is delivering another training program, there is an element of variability because two different tutors are teaching the two programs. There may be some amount of variation. But now, if one tutor is exceptionally good and another is mediocre, in that case, the program conducted by the mediocre will produce mediocre auditors, and one by an exceptionally great auditor or tutor will produce exceptionally great auditors. So, students or the learners or the auditors produced by the same organization will differ in their standards and level of competence just because two tutors are acting differently. Can this happen? Therefore, we would like to make sure both the tutors follows the same process of training. There may be some variation, but there's a negligible variation. They will cover all elements adequately in the similar fashion. So the variations will be very negligible and basic minimum standard will be same regardless of the program is conducted by one tutor in India and another tutor in Middle East, another tutor in Nigeria or elsewhere in the world. This brings consistency. So if you take one sample of the example of one student's result in Nigeria, another by another tutor in Kuwait, and both are okay, then the IRC and our auditors forms that these organizations quality management system has got a same or similar, a very consistent degree of similarity and consistency. That creates a good organization where variabilities are absolutely controlled. So this is how the variability can produce difference in the quality of the results. So in other words, if you go to Starbucks, for example, you find regardless of whoever is making, whichever baristas are making your cappuccino in one shop, in another shop, it will taste the same because they perfected the machines and the processes to bring the variables under absolute control. So you get the similar tasting coffee regardless of where you are taking it from. It will be the same in taste. If it is cappuccino, it is going to be the same. So this is what is random sampling process and chance cause of variance and assignable cause of variance. So when you are taking samples, what you do? You ask, can I have a look at how many purchase orders you have produced this month? And your period of implementation, say maybe for last 6 months. So can I take one sample which is almost 6 months old? So you take another sample. You don't allow them to give two samples. You ask, can you show me how many jobs you have done over the last 6 months? So you take one sample by one buyer 6 months ago and another current job by another buyer, which is very recent. And you look at the process, how the first buyer 6 months ago managed the purchase process, whether they have done the same control applied for purchasing piece of item, and the current 1 month old sample done by another person, the process is the same. So if both are in acceptable condition, both are good, and you didn't fall in love with those samples, and neither you wanted to find faults with these two guys, you wanted to see that there is a consistency over a period of time and job done by two different persons. So I'm talking about chance cause of variance and assignable cause of variance. My conclusion will be very solid and very accurate. It is very same way when you take one sample rice, there are millions of rice grains in one bowl, which is cooked. You test one or two, you know the entire condition of the remaining rice. But looking at this, you cannot accept another bowl. The moment you test another bowl, and that is also in the similarly cooked, you can, find both are acceptable. Now just imagine in a restaurant, in a hotel, if one is done by a manual effort and another is done in a rice cooker, for example, where time, water content, everything is controlled, there may be variations. So if now both the places, the same machine, same controls are done, so rice cooked in one branch of the restaurant will be the identically same in another place. Now, if there are two different chefs doing cooking rice manually, so you have to go possibly check both of them because manual involvement, the variations could be very wide, and in even then, in spite of that, they've got some guideline that for this much of rice, this much of water, this much of heat, and this is the duration, and this is how you remove the filter, remove the starch and water. Then both are doing the same thing. Rice in both the cases will be the same. So this is how you look at the competence of the person, and this is how you arrive at a solid and most reasonable, most reliable conclusion with a very, very limited sample. That's all about sampling process. I'm sure the short discussion that we had thrown some light, and you could understand the sampling process.